Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Low Budget Review Show. I'm your host, Eric Smith, and today I am talking about Department Zero by Paul Crilley, and this is from Pyre Books, which is an imprint of Prometheus Books. It says so on the back. So, you've got Harry Priest. He is divorced and has a daughter, and he works cleaning up crime scenes. And he and his partner get called out to a crime scene to do some cleanup. And this group of mysterious people, led by Havelock Graves, show up. They say, they're from the Interstitial Crime Department, and they're taking over this crime scene. So they kick Harry and his partner out, and then some very weird things start happening, and Harry gets recruited by the Interstitial Crime Department and Havelock Graves, and he has to help try to save the universe. And that's it in a nutshell. So, Department Zero, Paul Crilley. I'm a fan of Paul Crilley's work, and this is something a little different than what I've read from him before. It's, the story of Harry Priest. Just an average guy. Just wants to talk to his daughter every night before she goes to bed, do his job, get through life, and things go wrong. So he is at this crime scene, and as I said, Havelock Graves from the ICD shows up, and what Harry doesn't know is that his partner did something that sort of sets everything in motion from here. And things go wrong, not just for Harry, but for Havelock. He reluctly recruits Harry into the ICD, and then tells him that he, Havelock Graves, who was allegedly one of the top investigators for the ICD, he and his team have been demoted to Department Zero, which is the crime scene cleanup crew. So Harry is basically doing the same job. But what the ICD does is they investigate crimes that take place throughout the multiverse, essentially. And their department is this huge building, and there's this huge maze with doorways into different universes, different worlds, and there is a huge universe-threatening thing going on. And even though Havelock and Harry now are just supposed to be cleaning up crime scenes, Havelock feels they're the only ones that really know what's happening, and they need to investigate. And he wants to get his old job back. But they're hopping from dimension to dimension, and there's some really cool worlds in here as they're investigating and being assigned crime scenes to clean up. And there's a rival ICD investigator, and Lovecraftian mythos. If you read the back of the book, it says, yes, all the stuff that Lovecraft wrote about was real, and it all exists in these different dimensions and things. And that's the big it's the big threat, but there's somebody, I'm not going to tell you who, because it's a really cool take on an interesting character, a very fun take, but somebody wants to use things from the Cthulhu mythos. But there's also the Spear of Destiny in this, all sorts of stuff, sort of a hodgepodge, and we get to see glimpses of these different worlds. There's a great one where the Martians from War of the Worlds, that attack was real, and even though humans won, they've assimilated Martian technology, so it's sort of this weird steampunk, but alien steampunk, Victorian, well, I'm not even sure if it's Victorian England, but it's a weird England, because of this Martian technology. There's some really cool things in that world. There's a world where people have superpowers. Superheroes exist. There's a world that's very much a fantasy type world. I shouldn't say type. It's a fantasy world. There's magic and the types of things you might see in a fantasy book. and there's Nazis, and there's evil wizards, and a cult, and again, all sorts of Cthulhu mythos stuff. And it's all crammed into this book about an everyman, Harry Priest, who is a great character. I really like his character. He is an everyman. There's nothing super spectacular about him, except for his love for his daughter. He really does. He promised her he would say goodnight to her every night. And they have this cute little exchange they have before she goes to sleep. And it's very sweet. He's a nice character. And he's got a great sort of adversarial relationship with Havelock Graves, who is a very pompous character. And Havelock and Harry definitely butt heads in a very entertaining way. There are a couple other people on Harry's crew, but they're more side characters. The way they travel through dimensions is really interesting, and the technology that they use is pretty wild. I don't want to give any of this stuff away, which is why I'm being very vague about it. The worlds are fascinating. I would like to see more. I would like to see more Department Zero stuff, more Harry Priest and Havelock Graves, and I mean, I would love to see if Paul Crilley were to do more stories, see him like the next book, say, just kind of focuses on one world. It'd be interesting to see the world building that he would do, and how Harry and Havelock or whomever have to sort of figure out how to work in this world that's completely different from the world that they know. And he could even do, like a short story collection where each story is a different world that they've gone to, and they have to solve something or figure something out or stop the end of the world. But I would love to see more of these worlds, more new worlds, as well as maybe more of some of the worlds that are mentioned in here. It's very fast-paced story, a lot of action. Builds to a huge climax. Excuse me. With like I said, the villain. I love the villain. I don't want to tell you who the villain is. It is, but if you're familiar with a lot of the works of H.P. Lovecraft, it is a villain you will know, but not necessarily recognize. I mean, they say who it is, so you're going to know who it is. You're going to be like, oh, yeah. But it's not any version of this villain that I've ever seen before. And I really like the way that they're portrayed. And I'm purposely being incredibly vague so as not to give it away, because I think that reveal is a lot of fun. It's not... I mean, I guess there are horror elements. Obviously, if you've got Cthulhu and all that sort of thing, you have horror elements. It's not a horror novel. Definitely a sci-fi fantasy horror mix, I guess, but it's very lighthearted. There's a lot of funny stuff in here, especially the interactions between Harry and Havelock. And there's a lot of really weird stuff, very imaginative stuff in here. As I said, I like Paul Crilley. He's done some straightforward, steampunky kind of things. I was introduced to him through a particular comic book, which led me to his, I want to say Eberron, Dungeons and Dragons based world. He did a couple of novels where the main character was essentially like Sherlock Holmes in the Dungeons and Dragons world. And I absolutely loved those. Just these Sherlockian sort of mysteries in the Dungeons and Dragons world. Very well written, very entertaining, and he brings that same fine writing, entertainment to this. He gives us great characters, and my point of mentioning the other stuff is that he obviously has a very vast imagination. Even though, I mean, yes, you could say, well, he's just using H.P. Lovecraft stuff. you know, that someone already imagined all that, but what he does with it and these other worlds that he creates are fascinating. And some of the things and creatures that he has inhabiting these other worlds are amazing. Just on the Martian assimilated technology world, there are just some crazy, just little tiny blips of these crazy things. It's just background stuff, but they're really cool. And that's why I'd like to see some of this explored a little more. And I'm kind of rambling about that, I guess, but it's just really wild stuff, crazy stuff. But it's a really enjoyable book. As I said, Harry and Havelock, both very entertaining characters. The bad guys, very entertaining. The different worlds, very entertaining. Ooh, I almost lost my notebook here. So I think with all that being said, my rating for this book, there was so many things I could have chosen to draw, some crazy things, but I don't know that I have the skills for any of that. I went very simple. So Department Zero by Paul Crilley. And if you look at that cover there, there's all sorts of, you see this is an elevator going down to Department Zero, I guess, and you have all sorts of weird things, that sort of monkey angel looking thing, and if you look over there, you can see Cthulhu in the background, and these masks and creatures and hallways. It all comes into play when you read it. But anyway, something on the cover threw me for a second when I was about to show you my rating. And I'll tell you, because just a quick look as I glanced at that, I thought this was a mop, because they're cleanup people. Which leads me to what I drew, which was just a mop and bucket to represent the fact that Harry Priest and eventually Havelock Graves are just working crime scene cleanup. So I give Department Zero by Paul Crilley, oh, can we see it there? 4.5 mops and buckets. Not the greatest drawing. I know my lighting's always weird, so it's hard to see this, but you can see 4.5 out of 5 mops and buckets. And it's not 5 because as much as I love the stuff that's in here, there's a point where it almost feels like too much world hopping. As I said, I'd love to see more focus on some of these worlds, and there's some that are just visited very quickly, and they're cool worlds, but there's so much thrown into this. It's almost overwhelming. So 4.5, not a complete 5. Besides, I don't want it to go to Paul Crilley's head. I want to encourage him enough to write more of this, but I don't want him to think that he's reached the pinnacle of what he can do. Anyway, that's Department Zero by Paul Crilley. Very entertaining, highly recommended. So I guess that's the end of my rambling talk here. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put them in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Just post a spoiler warning. So if you want to know who that bad guy is, we can talk about it. I'll just post a spoiler warning so I don't give it away to the people that don't want to know ahead of time. So let's chat about this book or anything else. Please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, I will have a link or two for the book in the description below. I always tend to forget this stuff at the end of the videos. But I will have links in the description below to buy the book, because it's entertaining and I recommend it. It's a fun time. So that's it. This has been the Low Budget Review Show. I have been Eric Smith, and until next time, read more books.